I think this course is important, first of all, because a lot of folks in the United States don't know much at all about Cuba. We might hear that it's like some scary dictatorship or something, but most people don't hear very much more than that. And it's important to learn the reality in Cuba. It's not a scary dictatorship. It's actually a very beautiful country with very welcoming people that is unfortunately been suffering for 60 years from an economic blockade by the United States.
What motivated me to take this course was being a kinesiology major. I'm interested in becoming a physical therapist, and I wanted to kind of expand my knowledge on the healthcare system, especially comparing it to the one in the United States and to the one in Cuba, knowing that there is a lack of resources and trying to kind of be an advocate for that as well.
For this course, to me, it added a piece of home. My passion, what I want to do with my future is actually work with people who have disabilities. So forming a connection like this in Cuba was a way for me to personally connect with this trip. With a course that has a syllabus and an outline, I was so grateful to be learning these things, but it just added so much more to the trip to have a personal connection to it.
At first, I was actually not going to do a winter term. I just didn't have the opportunity to. I had signed up too late for any courses. And so what ended up happening was the Cuba trip opened up last minute in, I think, October, November, because someone dropped. And I remember people telling me when I grew up in high school that a lot of regrets come from never studying abroad.
I was interested in this course mainly because I am a global health major and I am on a pre-med track, and a big goal of the course was to study the healthcare system in Cuba because it is very different than the healthcare system we have in the United States. And also I'm a Hispanic Studies minor, so I've taken several classes in Spanish, and so I was really interested to study abroad, especially somewhere where I was somewhat familiar with the language already.
My experience at my homestay was like if I was at home. And I wasn't really expecting that, but it was heartwarming. And that's what I mean by like the Caribbean culture is very similar in that like people are always willing to show up for you and like care for you, and you don't even have to be family. And I haven't felt that in a while, and I felt that when I was there with my homestay family.
You can tell that they have been doing this for a long time, and you can tell that they're actually passionate about having people over in their house and welcoming people inside of their house. And everyone in the neighborhood was so unified. They stay together, they stick together. Every time, even if they're driving a car, if they go on the side of another car, they would make sure they honk their horn just to get their attention and communicate with each other. It was just a representation of solidarity.
I stayed with Maddie, who's a senior, and we were with Yamale and her two grandmas, and I loved them. They were my favorite people ever. Every morning, afternoon, and night, we got amazing meals, and I have so many pictures of it because it was my favorite thing. And I loved staying with my homestay. I got to practice my Spanish a lot, and even though Maddie and I weren't the best, we still like worked with the abuelas to figure out what we're trying to say to each other, and I love staying in my house.
One of my favorite site visits was to a community project where they work with children in the neighborhood who have Down syndrome. And so they do a number of things with these, I mean, they're children, and a lot of these people are also adults and may be in their 20s or 30s and are living with Down syndrome. And they come in with their family members, a lot of whom haven't ever received any training on how to, teach people with Down syndrome, and they do activities like gardening and also cultural activities. We got to see a talent show at the end of our visit where some of the folks were doing lip syncing and were dancing, and they're inviting us to dance with them.
My favorite activity was the dance class. I just feel like it was a good opportunity for students to kind of get loose and be themselves, and just have fun.
My favorite site visit would have to be definitely when we went to this community center where there are children with either, not children, but adults or children with autism or Down syndrome, just because it really emphasized that we are very privileged and have a lot of resources that we can use in the United States. Over there, they really emphasize that they have literally nothing, and there are mothers that have hip problems. There are mothers that have swollen knees, and they still walk to even take their child to a center that they can get distracted for a little bit. In my perspective, because I got emotional when I was there as well, that mothers really do a lot for their child, and sometimes we just take for granted what we have in the United States, especially even when it comes to something as taking a bus or driving to a destination that you need to go to.
Visiting Vinales was maybe the funnest part of the trip, just because it was a time where we all did come together as a collective group. It was totally different from Havana. Havana is big. It had all these shops and all these fancy old school cars and everyone just walking across the ocean, and it was nice. Havana was really nice, but with visiting Vinales, it was like condensed Havana.
Oh my God, Vinales was really cool. The homestays were different because I think it is more built for tourists, and so it is a lot nicer, and so I got that aspect. But Vinales was, because I'm a biology, so I'm a big nature guy. It's kind of what I want to do and pursue, and like the study of plants. And so when I went to the park, I was eating it up. I loved that national park. I forget what it was called, but it was so pretty. Interaction between man and nature is a lot more, I would say, apparent, just because you're like, oh, like this is untouched, and then you're looking like, oh, there's people living here, but not in a bad way. It's like, it's actually very nice to see because they know how to live with the land.
My favorite part was walking down into the valley of Vinales, where the mountains were by us, but then the families who had lived there for generations were still living there. So it was amazing to learn about the connection that the World Heritage Site had made with the families that had been living there and the way that they worked together. So that was amazing to learn about.
I think that solidarity is a really important concept because when we think about structures of power in our society, those structures often operate through what you might call divide and rule, right? So we have a racial hierarchy where people are separated into races, and then, there's the white supremacy over people of color and Black people. There's gender hierarchies, there's hierarchy of sexuality. All of these different things. And so to be in solidarity is to resist those divisions that are imposed on us and to assert that, no, we're together, we're united, and we look out for each other.
Solidarity to me means being able to be sensitive and vulnerable within the situations, also being able to be an advocate for those who are not in your position and privilege that you have.
Solidarity means openness and this willingness to share with each other what your lives are, and then from that, walking together.
Solidarity to me means showing up for others in a way that they want you to show up for them. Because I feel like a lot of times, we show up for people in ways that we think they need. But I feel like solidarity is about being attentive to needs.
Solidarity to me means being open-minded, being willing to listen to others, setting your own opinions and your own identity aside, and just being willing to be there 100% completely in support of another person or group of people.
You didn't go through it, so you don't know exactly what the cause is to you, but the fact that you can still stand and support another person because you understand that this is important to someone else, I think that's what solidarity is.
To me personally, I feel like solidarity is the main reason why Cuba is still up and running like it is now. The way that they devote themselves to their people and to each other just express and explains how you can run a country if you have that sense of unity.